Joining me today to discuss cybersecurity is Harry Regan he's Vice President of Security Consulting at Securicon. Welcome, Harry.
Thank you.
Industrial cybersecurity includes a broad range of products and suppliers these days. To start this off and to frame the discussion, could you please give us kind of position and explain where you fit into that market space?
Certainly. Securicon is unlike the other participants in this event, where we are vendor neutral. We don't have a product, we're an assessment company. So we sell consulting services, generally in the not only cyber, but also physical and social security arena. And that's important because when you look at how attacks actually happen, it's rarely that they just come through one attack vector. They're usually, well planned, well organized, have a social component and a physical component as well as a cyber component.
Based on what you've seen in 2016, do you have some key initiatives that you're going to be focusing on in 2017 that you'd like to talk about?
So we're looking at, you look at things like the Mirai botnet, which took advantage of IoT devices. The thought of your video camera attacking, a target is a little disconcerting, certainly. But there are a whole lot of devices. Everybody's making smart devices these days, and the possibility of compromising those into doing other malicious activity is really significant. And being able to, identify, what vulnerabilities, can be exploited to use for malicious means is one thing, but then B, how do you defend against it? And that's the space we're in. Figuring out, what your risks are, and then what to do about it.
There's a lot of discussion today about the convergence of IT and OT, the staffs, but there's also a lot of technologies and capabilities that are out there, new technologies like AI and things like that. Does this represent an opportunity for your company in some way?
Very much so. So one of the things, one of our more lighthearted presentations suggests is that we can translate IT to OT and vice versa, and then also translate things to the C-suite. So we become the Rosetta Stone, if you will, between the different constituencies. But the thing that's important is the OT environment has really had a much slower evolution cycle from a technology perspective than the IT side has. And that can't exist anymore. That has to accelerate just with the escalation of the threatscape that's facing them. So that becomes an area we're deeply involved in. How do you educate both sides, the IT and the OT side, as to what their roles in this brave new world is, and how do you implement some of these technologies to protect, to notify, to defend against threats as they evolve.
The brave new world you just mentioned, I think that was the term you just used. That also, I think, includes today the industrial Internet of Things and things like that, a lot more devices and things. And we know a lot of companies are very interested in that. A lot of industrial companies are including that. Automation companies are including that in their product offerings. Can you comment on the kinds of impacts that might have on operational safety and operations and from a cybersecurity perspective?
Certainly, especially from a safety perspective. If everybody talks about attacks on the smart grid or a plant or whatnot. When you start looking at things like PLCs and RTUs and devices at that level, it's very hard to read from the outside what they actually do. You can tell, it does this function, it turns on this switch, it does, some sequence of events. But what that actually means, unless you have an architectural diagram of the plant and know what it's doing, it's very hard to guess what manipulating this device or stalling this device actually does. And what that means is, in an attack scenario, an attack would be, the term we use is noisy. They could come in, they could trip something they shouldn't trip, and that's where the safety systems come into event, keeping boilers from exploding and generators from eating themselves.
What do you see as for 2017 and the future? What do you see as your headwinds and tailwinds for your market, for the cybersecurity market, for services?
Yeah, the tailwinds is, there is an escalation in the variety and types and severity of events. And part of that is driven by, advances in technology, the IoT space and the industrial IoT space in particular. So, those are creating, depending on your perspective, exciting new opportunities for exploitation and damage and compromise. The tailwinds are really, or the headwinds rather, are really two different factors. And one is, the industrial world, for very valid reasons, has been relatively slow to adopt technology. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Plant runs, don't touch anything. Availability is number one. So introducing new technologies, introducing new methodologies and approaches and monitoring devices and things like that is problematic in that environment. And there's a pragmatic element that you have to consider. And the other thing, the weakest part of any security program in any industry, in any sector of any industry, is people. People, as a rule, don't get security. They know their function, they know what they have to do, but it's usually security is an afterthought. So educating them, incorporating things into their regimen that can be used to to support the security program, that becomes key. Easy to say, very hard to do.
Well, thank you, Harry. Today we've been speaking with Harry Regan, who is Vice President of Security Consulting at Securicon. Thank you for watching.